And we are live and ready to talk about what? Conflict. Oh no. Roberta, are we going to really do this? Talk about conflict and when to avoid it and when to engage?
I sure hope so, because becoming a confident person around conflict is freeing. It's totally freeing to know that you don't have anxiety, you don't have to back off, you don't have to go home and say, can't believe what that person did or said, and I did nothing. And you want to know that you can count on yourself in the moment. So it's a great topic.
It is. I know that conflict avoidance sometimes is seen as a pattern of emotional weakness, or conflict creation is seen like aggressiveness and bullying. So, where is this happy medium? How do we address conflict in a way? Or maybe we should talk about what is conflict, first of all, right?
Well,
Start there.
well, I think conflict is simple. We all notice it's not a four-letter word, right? Uh,
Right. Accept
conflict,
it. Yeah.
conflict simply means we have a difference of opinion, a difference of value, or a difference of goal and outcome that we want. And so it's a conversation. That's all. It's one of many different kinds of communication and conversation. But if in our early life we have had trouble with conflict, so much happens before the age of 5 or 6 where we learn whether conflict is safe, or we learn if we've been told not to bring up things or not to dispute things or not to have a different opinion. And so it gets embedded in our little nerve endings when we're small. And the great news is that we can learn new strategies, we can rethink it all, and we can actually manage conflict.
What a concept. And I know I can see like how in my life like conflict was role modeled. I used to see my grandmother and my father, and it was my grandmother on my mother's side, engage in these incredible like debates and conversations, and they were totally like opposed, but they were very engaged with each other, and they were very respectful of each other. And so to me, that kind of engaging was perfectly normal to do. And so expressing my opinion, though I was very shy, when I had an opinion at some point in time, I I didn't like double check myself, except for my shyness part, which was, I don't know what that was about exactly, but and I
Being
do
around
feel
people
like I
who
go in that.
being around people who have strong opinions and express it, you can withdraw, do I have a place in this?
Yeah. So, but I did see how to do it. And so having an opinion was okay. It wasn't, I just had to be as strong as them. And there was a time in my life where I realized, just like you said in the beginning here, it was, I wish I could say it so well, and I couldn't get the words out. There was like this fog of a wall in between. So there was definitely a maturing process or a development process that I think happened for me around being able to speak my opinion. And
Mhm.
so I think, I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but conflict was hard because I didn't have the words. I didn't know what those
Mm.
words were. And so I probably did try to avoid it. I found ways to be very diplomatic, and see everything from everybody's side. So I can definitely see everybody's side. And then how do you actually do conflict if you see everybody's side? Actually, I think it served me really well in that, because I didn't have to just be attached to my side.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, being able to see everybody's side is fine, but if you get caught in that soup and you don't have an opinion of your own, if you don't know what it is you need and you can't put that into the conversation, that's where things go a little sideways. Because then if I can see everybody's side, I then have to notice about myself, am I a people pleaser? Like, am I trying to keep them all happy because I'm not going to jump in and express anything? And when is it wise to do that? I mean, sometimes it's wise, just let them go at it. I'm not going to interject myself. But on the other hand, if it's just me and another human and I'm avoiding conflict, sometimes it's wise to do that because maybe it's not that important. Maybe the person is in high anxiety and you need to save it for another time. But sometimes it needs to be said. It just needs to be said. I'll give you an example of this habit. I mean, always stick to the facts. There's a person in San Diego, a couple, who do some work around relationship. And I know them. I've been to their home once. So the fellow rang me up this week and he said, "Do you remember who I am?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I remember who you are." And then he said, "Well, we have something that you need, and we are offering a relationship consulting opportunity for free. And we're going to give you," and he read me the whole script. And I said, "Well, you asked me if I remember who you are. Do you remember who I am?" And he said, "No, I have no clue." And I said, "Well, if you had looked up to remember who I am, you would know what I do. And if you knew what I do, it would be highly unlikely you would be offering this to me." And his response was, "Everybody needs this." Now, okay, there was emotion that could have been generated in there, but to me, there was a little bit of humor. So I said to him, "Well, what is your background that would allow you to offer this?" And he said, "I've been married for 24 years and I have 4 children." I said, "So do hundreds of thousands of dysfunctional people." And he said, "Yes, but," and I said, "There is no but. Being married for 24 years and having 4 children is not a qualification to be calling me up and telling me that you can tell me how to have a better relationship when you don't know if I have one." Right? So these are the kind of conflict situations that you make decisions about. At that point, after he'd said that, and he got into the yeah buts, I just said to him, "Well, really, no, I don't think I have any need for what you're offering." But, that could be seen as a conflict, like, how dare you? But one of the things that's important always is to go to the facts. And I just did my podcast yesterday on something called emotional facts, which is what toxic people use to persuade and manipulate you. They're not real, but they use them. And if you are in relationship with difficult people, having conflict with them gets very convoluted and complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also very true. It's like how to stay centered and grounded when somebody's trying to kind of tip you off of your space and totally invalidate your space. How do you stay in your personal power while somebody's coming at you with, trying to create? There's these times when they're just trying to create conflict because they need that energy surge, or they're too agitated and they need a distraction. It's not about the person they're coming at. It's really about themselves. So any
It's
tips for
actually
staying?
always about
It's
themselves.
always about themselves. A lot of times, even if you're not a hijackal or really high conflict person, sometimes things come out sideways. And if you're the recipient of that, staying grounded is really key to being in your power to address that conflict, right? And
Mhm.
if you're an avoider, you're like, yes, 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 whatever you say, right? If you don't want to escalate it, you don't want to be an escalator to the conflict. So what tips do you have for staying grounded and being more to the resolution, to the engagement? And I think your story was brilliant in how you did it. So let's dissect that. What were the key things you did?
Well, first of all, I let him talk. And I think that's always wise because we have a tendency as humans, when someone starts to say a sentence and we're in a little bit of anxiety, we have a tendency to assume we know what the rest of the sentence is, and we're already forming our rebuttal at the halfway point. And so I think it's very important to let the person say everything they have to say and just take it in. Don't be sitting there tapping your fingers going, "Okay, when you shut up, I'm going to show you how wrong you are." Um, take it in. Like, what are they coming from? What are they saying? What is the purpose of this conflict at the moment? How is it being? Does this person actually have a whole lot of anxiety? What's going on? Now, I know that's a lot to calibrate, but you asked me what I do. Well, I'm listening to this fellow. I know that he's not well educated. I know things about him. And so now he's telling me that he's going to tell me how all this is going. So as I said, I was kind of amused. And so I let him speak. And I think that's number one, is listen to the end. Get the whole message, the whole thing this person is endeavoring to say to you. Because we've all been interrupted, right? We have a conflict. We say, I want to talk to you about something. Oh, there you go again. Well, okay, well, we haven't even started talking about it. But if I'm not comfortable, and one of the things, if you know you have a conflict with someone, make sure you choose your timing. If you need to go and talk to your partner about something that's bothering you, don't try to slip it in when they're on their way to work or they just came in and they're tired or whatever. Remember that you have latitude in the time that you choose to bring it up. Now, on the telephone in this case, no, I answered the phone, my bad, right? And then let the person speak. Listen to the end. Then ask questions. Put yourself aside for a moment and lean in and get curious about what the other person's saying. Okay, do I have it? Is this what you meant? Clarify, find out. Now, everything in you might be going, no.
I so
But
want to attack you back.
that's right. But let's bring our emotionally mature selves to the party here, and let's just hear, because we can delay our self-gratification. It's not that difficult. And then listen, lean in, ask questions, and then speak only about yourself. Well, for me, that isn't the same degree of an issue, and because of this, and try and get to a place where you can give a little information, you can have a little input into the conversation and see how it lands. If the other person is in full flight because they're so afraid to bring something up, you're not going to get anywhere. So you're just going to have to lean in and say, I can tell that this is really important to you, and I really want to hear what you have to say. I wonder if this is the best time. What do you think? Maybe it would be better if we did it like after dinner, and maybe that would be better. And you to see what I did. I matched the person's intensity and their pace and their volume to have them recognize that I recognize their agitation. But if I have the ability to see that, oh, this person's really a little anxious, more anxious than they can be clear, this is not the best time to have this conversation. So I can just lean in and acknowledge how much energy they have around it and promise to say, I'm interested, and could we choose a better time?
You're choosing a better time because they're too riled up at this point, and it's kind of dangerous for you to be at the effect of that. And so if they say no, I want to talk about it now.
Okay, well then I say, my concern is that when our bodies are all engaged in this way, that our brains are not going to work and things are going to blurt out our mouths. And I just wanted to postpone that so we could have the best result. Talk about the process for a minute as opposed to the issue.
Right.
That often is a good thing to do. You just pull back and say, yeah, I see you've got a lot of energy around this. It's really important to you. And I want to talk about it. I'm happy to have the conversation. I'm just thinking that there's a lot of anxiety around it right now. We might be better off at another time. What do you think? And sometimes that will allow the person to feel heard, and they will back off. Now, if they're in full flight or on the edge of full flight, you're just going to have to watch them go, what, whoa, and have compassion for them, because they're going to say all kinds of things they don't really mean. So don't let it land on you. I love this phrase from a spiritual book I read a long time ago. And it said, who's ever most sane is responsible for the relationship.
Mm.
So if I can just notice what's going on and not get my knickers in a twist just because yours are, then I can be the one who says, oh, this is the wrong time for this conversation. I can be more objective rather than leaping into the emotion.
Right.
And that's the opportunity that we have, because we all know that when our anxiety takes over, when our stress takes over, when our pent up stuff takes over, that we're going to say things that are not going to land well. They're not going to be clear. They're going to maybe be things we regret saying. So if we really care about somebody, we don't want them to say things that they'll regret. So it's something that we can do if we realize that. Now, if they catch us off guard, or maybe we're having a similar bad day, okay, it's probably going to be on. So what can you
Game
do?
on.
What you can do is to remind yourself, what facts can I say? Now, in yesterday's podcast, I was talking about these emotional facts. When someone comes at, and everybody can go to saveyoursanitypodcast.com and listen to it. But emotional facts are somebody making something sound so emotionally necessary that dire consequences will happen when there is no reality for it. And it's a thing that they use in court. When you're writing an argument, when you're preparing documents and facts for the court, that, I even yesterday on the podcast said, I read a piece from a book called How to Write a Good Legal Brief. And it was like, you can be more persuasive if you put emotional facts in. And that's what people do. And emotional facts is oxymoronic. Because our emotions are shifting. We don't have one emotion all the time. So it's not measurable. It's not something I could come back to and say, yes, there it is again. It's exactly like it was. There are degrees, there's mitigating circumstances and things. So when people have emotional facts, they're just coming at you to win. All right. They're going to make it up. Yeah, you always do that. You never consider me. It's always a fight with you. I don't know if I could put up with this any longer. And they're throwing out all these emotional pieces that have nothing to do with, I have really a difficult time hearing you tell me that I'm worthless. Like, I can't hear worthless without going kind of vaguely cloudy, because that is such a charged word for me. Could you explain to me, give me an example of my worthlessness? So when people are getting into emotion, one of the ways that you get them back into their left brain is to ask for an example. And if you do that, then they have to kind of scramble for a moment, because they're in all this high emotion. And you can see that happens. Just say, I really get that you're upset. Could you give me an example so I clearly know what it is that you're responding to? And that helps them go back into their logical brain, their linear brain, that whole metaphor, to say, okay, what do I remember? Well, at that moment, a little bit of the fire goes out. And if they can't do it, if they're in full flight, they'll say, don't go asking for examples. Just take my word for it. I can't stand this. But it is a tactic that you can use, not even a tactic, because that has manipulative connotations. It's a strategy that you can use to say, okay, I really care about this conversation. Let me see if I can get back into the facts, and maybe I can learn something, and it will help take a little bit of the emotion out of this. It'll take a little bit of the heat out. And then after they give you a fact, and if it's not a fact, if it's something that they just made up, then ask them if they're sure. Because if you ask them if they're sure, I mean, one of two things, they may go off like a Roman candle again. But if you say, it's not the way I remember it, are you really sure about that? Because I remember it this way. Sometimes you can capture a little airtime that way, that they might be interested in hearing what you remember. It all depends where you catch them. If you think about people when they have anger or arousal, if you think about it, a scale of 1 to 10, and 1 is a resting heart rate. Well, if you get over a 4, the body's already started trying to protect you and going into fight and flight and everything. And when it does that, it wants to keep you alive, so it brings all the extra oxygen down to the heart and lungs to keep you alive. And what does that mean? You're semi brain dead. You know, you're going to make, as Ashley Brilliant said, and I mentioned it last time, you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret, right? So it's really important for us to know the dynamics of all of this so that when we're in it, we can maybe be a little more conscious about how to diffuse it.
And sometimes it's coming at you like, you know, rain, it's like a fire hose. And yeah, I think your advice of just letting it come, but don't let it stick. Because the minute we let it stick, then we go into our higher elevated, heart rate. And so I love the idea is asking questions back of them. Is that what you meant? Oh, anything else you want to say? Sometimes just to buy myself time, I'll say anything else, because then they can say it again if they like, and I can really hear it. I'm like, oh, they're really upset. And I can just say, oh, what are they upset about? Are they really upset at something I did? And if I did, what can I take responsibility for, and what's not for me to take responsibility for, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
I can own up to, well, I can see how that got triggered. Not my intention. Or, here's, is there something you need? What do you need? Let's resolve it here. Like then there's the resolution. So letting them say what they need as well. Sometimes they don't know what they need. They just need to be heard. I'm like, okay, if they just need to be heard, then I don't even need to respond. I just, it's like, great. Did anything else you need to say? Or is there something you need out of this conversation? Well, how do you feel? And I'm like, well, didn't,
Blindsided.
I don't really have a feeling on this. And then that could be really unsatisfying for them because they wanted to engage in a conflict. But there may be no conflict over here, right?
But another place you can go at that moment is when they say, "What do you think?" You say, "Well, I really had no idea that this was an issue. So it's good that you shared it. I may not like the delivery, but don't comment on delivery." Let me say something about that.
Okay.
I work with a bunch of people all over the world, and they will say, "Well, I'm just not going to talk to you if you talk in that tone of voice." And like, oh, give it a rest. I mean, if you are complaining about the delivery, you are avoiding hearing the message. And if you won't enter into a conversation because you don't like the delivery method, this is with your partner, a long-term relationship with your mother or your father or your sister or whatever. If you are constantly talking about how they deliver rather than listening to their content, you have no interest in solving that problem.
Mm.
And that's an important thing, I think, to consider. Because I was talking to someone the other day and they said, you're the fourth therapist we've gone to. And, I'm just not going to talk to him unless you can do something about his tone of voice. And I said, yeah, I get that. Actually, no. I'm going to invite you to give up being so responsive to his tone of voice, recognize what it does to you, and then lean in and become interested in what he's saying.
Mm.
And she said, what? And no, you're not going to get away with that tone of voice thing with me. And it's something that people use as a reason, an excuse, a justification for why I'm not going to engage in figuring this out, is because I have what I think is this ironclad way of shutting you down, which is I'm not going to talk to you if it's that tone of voice. Well, then you have no interest in the relationship. Now, you may feel fearful. You may need to go to somebody and have the conversation there where you feel safer. I'm not suggesting that you may not feel or even be unsafe. I'm just suggesting notice that if you're using something that is a comment on the delivery as a reason for not to learn about what's going on in the relationship, maybe reconsider that.
It is hard, though, to be at the receiving end of someone's vitriol, that anger and that, wow, why are they saying it that way? So just press forward in that is what you're saying. Listen to the content. Is there ever a time to address, like, why are you being so mean to me?
Well, yes, of course there is, but not in that moment. When somebody's in full flight, they're not hearing. You know,
Right.
when the blood goes down to their heart and lungs to keep them alive, and they're running on less oxygen than they need to think clearly, that's no time to say, you know, you're mean to me and I don't like it, and hope that you're going to get a result, because they're going to say, well, you deserve it, right? Because now they're in blame, they're in shame, they're in manipulation mode. So that's not the moment. Another moment would be to bring it up a day or two later and say, a personal weather report, you know, that I talk about in Kaizen for couples. I I'm still reeling from feeling assaulted. The words really, really hurt me. And see whether the other person is at all interested. You know, the thing is, we can't make people interested in us much as we'd like to, but we can calibrate whether or not they are. If you say to your partner, you know, that really confused me, or it hurt me, or it made me feel less than, or whatever happened, and your partner does not lean in with interest, take note. Red flag. Right? Because your partner needs to be interested in what upsets you, needs to be interested in how to resolve a conflict. And if they're not, then eventually you're going to have to make a decision about whether or not you're safe in that relationship, or whether that relationship has any growth potential. And that's often what you come to someone like me for, is just to find out. You know, many people will engage with me and say, I need to know whether I should leave. Okay, well, let's figure a whole bunch of stuff out before we figure that out, right?
Right.
And that's what offers us the opportunity. But if you're constantly living in conflict, and you're constantly being pushed to the side because someone else's conflict is taking up more air and it's repeating, then you have to step back and reconsider the relationship. But, you know, our conversation today is about conflict and knowing when to engage and when not to. And, you know, avoid conflict when somebody is in high alert. Meet them on the level of their intensity, volume, and pace, and acknowledge that they're really upset about it. But don't try to solve the problem at that moment. And then if you notice that you're conflict adverse and you'd like to speak up, and you are hurt, or you are troubled, or whatever is going on, and you're not speaking up, then you need to get some help in order to have the confidence to clearly express your boundaries.
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of getting clear on what is your truth, because you've got the other person's words in your head and you can see their point of view and you feel already bad about it. And so, how do you actually stand up for yourself? How do you be in your power? It's about deciphering what's yours and what's theirs. And sometimes you do need to talk to another person. I know when I've scheduled a time to talk with somebody about something that was in conflict, I've gone to you or to a friend to talk it out first and prepare for that conversation,
Yeah.
because they are so good at getting my heart elevated, my heart rate elevated and it out of my brain, that I need coaching to stay in my brain sometimes. So it's really helpful, especially when we get so agitated by these by situations, and we do need to resolve them. Otherwise they fester within. So conflict isn't inherently good or bad.
Yeah.
Stuff comes up, and how do we deal with it in that, like you said, the most sane way, that the same person is responsible for the relationship? Or that was a quote, I know. But you know, being responsible is what we're all about here on the Transform Your Relationship show. How can you be responsible to have the best relationships in your life, and including the one you have with yourself?
Right. And if you find yourself in tension because you are not speaking up, notice that you need skills to reduce that tension and be able to speak up, and go get some. You know, our homes, our families may not have taught us that. You know, I think about a time when I was doing a training for Trans Canada Pipeline in Canada. And there were 300 people in the room. And I said, it was on conflict. And I said, okay, everybody who came from a family where nobody said boo to a goose, it's Canada, so we say that a lot. And nobody speaks up when there's conflict. If you came from that family, go to this wall. If you came from the family, everybody yelled and screamed and then hugged it out, go to that wall. And if you're somewhere in between, do that. So here's 300 people, big crowd on each wall, kind of a thin line through the middle. And then I said, all right, now look around and just imagine that you are in the cubicle or in the team of a person who is the furthest away from you at this moment in this room. How are you going to converse when one person wants to talk, the other person wants to shut down? That's where we need skills. And of course, I said that's why we're here today, is so that we can bridge those gaps. But on an interpersonal level, it's a skill set. If you come from a home where you couldn't speak up, or you didn't speak up, or it was unsafe to speak up, or nobody spoke up, and everybody suffered in silence and, kind of walked around with their jaw clenched, and then you marry a person who came from a home who just let it all hang out, said whatever they said, and they said, oh, yeah, okay, I love you anyway. Like, whoa, you're going to have trouble with this. It is not going to magically meld. So it's important for us to realize what kind of family we came from and how they manage conflict, and then say, okay, how do I manage conflict? What skills do I need to shore myself up? And if you happen to be with a hijackal, the people that I talk about all the time, they want to take all the air out of the room. They want to take up all the space. They want to be the master puppeteer. They want to be the one who knows. They want to be the one who's right. And they will just get bigger and bigger and bigger and take up all the space and try to make you smaller and smaller and smaller. And eventually, if you go with it, you end up as this sort of doormat come pretzel that is like, oh, whatever. And, that's not an empowered place to live. And you don't have to live there. You do not have to stay there. That's why I do the Hijackal Hacks series, because you don't have to stay there. The tagline of Hijackal Hacks is how you can say no to coercive control. You need to know that there are ways to say no to it, and just saying no very loudly will not work.
Or even quietly won't work.
No.
I think this was a really rich conversation about how to stay in your personal power, how to identify if you need skills. So don't feel bad. I mean, from the time I was little, I couldn't speak in powerfully because I didn't have the skills, not because anybody was shutting me down. I just couldn't. I saw these amazing people who could talk and speak their mind, but I didn't have skills. And it is a skill. We have to develop it. We have to learn it. And it takes time and patience. And, you may have a gift in your life of a conflict generator, and that will encourage you to that. So if you're being encouraged in that way and you need help, to reach out. And I love your podcasts. I mean, you have 3, 4, how many do you have now?
I have only one. Emotional Savvy has 150 episodes, and everyone's welcome to go over and listen to those because they're general about relationships. But I also have 150 on Save Your Sanity, which is where I put all my energy, and do 2 podcasts a week there, help for toxic relationships.
And then where can they find the Hijackal Hacks?
Well, Hijackal Hacks is on YouTube. My YouTube channel is For Relationship Help, FOR Relationship, HELP, just like it is on my background here. So my website is that, and so is my YouTube channel.
Awesome. You can find everything there. Awesome. So thank you for this enriching conversation. Inspiring. I love the steps we went through. If you missed them, please watch the replay with the steps for how to handle conflict, especially if you're conflict averse or you tend to escalate conflict. If you're on one of those 2 sides of the room, let's meet in the middle, right? And move our relationships forward and be the sane person in the room and be responsible.
And if you have questions, put them in the comments. We'll respond to them.
Yeah.
Because maybe you're listening to the replay and you didn't have an opportunity to speak up here, or maybe you're listening and you didn't want to speak up yet because you're formulating your question. Put it in the comments and we'll respond to it.
Looks like a winner. Thank you so much. We'll be
Thank
back in
you.